She said it at my own kitchen table, not in a fight, not at the end of a long argument where things had escalated past the point of control. She said it calmly, in the middle of a Sunday afternoon while I was pouring tea and she was sitting in the chair where my husband used to sit, and she said, "Dorothy, I need you to hear me. You need to stop interfering in our lives." I set the teapot down. I looked at her. Her name is Lauren. She has been married to my son, Christopher, for 7 years. She is 36 years old, and she has a quality that I have spent 7 years trying to find the right word for. And the right word, I've concluded, is certainty. She is certain about everything. Certain about how things should be done. Certain about who belongs where in a room and who has said too much and who should say less. On that Sunday afternoon, she was certain that I should say less. "We appreciate everything you've done," she continued, in the tone of someone reading from a prepared document. "The trust fund is wonderful, and the children love you. But you insert yourself into decisions that are ours to make. Christopher and I have discussed this, and we think it would be better for everyone if you took a step back. Took a step back." I looked at my kitchen, my table, the chair her husband, my son, had eaten breakfast in for 18 years. I thought about the trust fund she had just described as wonderful. $1.1 million, established in my grandchildren's names, administered by me as trustee, funded over 22 years from money I had earned and saved and invested, with the specific intention of giving my grandchildren a foundation that nobody could take from them. $1.1 million in a trust that bore my name as trustee, that I controlled completely. I said, "Thank you for telling me, Lauren. I'll give it some thought." She smiled, the smile of someone who had just delivered a difficult message and was relieved it had been received without conflict. She left 20 minutes later. I sat at my kitchen table. I picked up my phone. I dialed my attorney, and I said, 2 words: freeze it. In about 70 minutes, you're going to understand everything. Every year of it, every check written and visit managed, and opinion unsolicited by me, but delivered by her. You're going to understand what happened when Lauren tried to make a withdrawal from that trust 4 weeks later. But first, you need to understand who I am and what I built. Because the trust fund is not the story. The trust fund is just the document that told the truth. My name is Dorothy. I am 69 years old. I live in the same house in Connecticut that I have lived in for 38 years, which is not stubbornness, but comfort. I know every corner of it, every creak of the third stair, every way the light moves through the kitchen window over the course of a day. I worked for 31 years as a financial analyst for an investment firm. Not glamorous work in the way that people imagine Wall Street to be glamorous. It was detailed, precise, often repetitive, and required the specific discipline of sitting with numbers for long hours without losing the thread. I was good at it. I rose to a senior position. I earned well. I mention the career because it is directly relevant to everything that follows. I understand money. Not in the casual, general sense, in the specific, technical, legally precise sense. I understand trusts. I understand what a trustee can do. I understand what cannot be done to a trust without the trustee's authorization. Lauren did not know this about me, or she knew it abstractly and had not applied the abstraction to the specific trust fund that I controlled. That was her first and most consequential error. My husband, Gerald, died 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Enough time to say everything, not enough time to stop missing him. He was the architect between us. I was the builder. He saw the shape of things, and I figured out how to make them structurally sound. The trust fund was both of us. His idea to establish it, my expertise to structure and manage it. Christopher is our only child. He is 42 years old. He is, at his core, a good man, thoughtful, hardworking, the kind of father who shows up to things and remembers details. He is also a man who married a woman with very strong opinions about how a family should be organized, and who has, over 7 years, gradually come to see the world through the organizing principle that his wife provides. I do not blame Christopher for this. Marriage shapes people. It is supposed to. But the specific shape Lauren has imposed on their household has, over 7 years, gradually moved me from the center of my grandchildren's lives to the periphery. My grandchildren's names are Oliver, 11, and Sophie, 8. Oliver calls me Gran. Sophie calls me Grandma Dot, which started when she was 3 and couldn't quite manage Dorothy, and which I love more than my actual name. I see them approximately once a month. I used to see them every week. The reduction did not happen at once. It happened the way all Lauren's adjustments happen, gradually, with reasons that each individually reasonable, that accumulated into a pattern that was not. The trust fund existed before Lauren entered the picture. I began establishing it when Christopher was in his late 20s, with the long-term view of a financial analyst who understands compound growth and the value of beginning early. By the time Christopher married Lauren, the fund had been growing for 15 years and had reached the kind of balance that makes people take notice. She noticed. The first time Lauren mentioned the trust fund directly was at a family dinner about 3 years into the marriage. She mentioned it casually, as though it were a shared household resource rather than a separate legal entity. She said something about how the trust could help with a renovation they were planning. I said, equally casually, that the trust was restricted to the grandchildren's education and significant life needs, and that home renovation did not qualify under its terms. She smiled. She did not bring it up again at that dinner. She brought it up again in various forms over the following 4 years. Each time, I explained the terms. Each time, she smiled. Each time, something in the room shifted slightly. I want to tell you about the 7 years before the kitchen table Sunday, because the trust fund does not make sense without them. Lauren's relationship with me has always been organized around control, specifically around who has it in any given room. This is not a criticism I arrived at quickly. I resisted it for years, told myself I was being an overly possessive mother-in-law, told myself that the natural friction between a wife and her husband's mother was being read by me as something more calculated than it was. I ran the numbers, eventually. Literally. I am a financial analyst. I track things. In the first year of their marriage, I was invited to Christopher's home for dinner approximately once a month. In the second year, approximately twice a month. Things were good. We were finding a rhythm. In the third year, once a month. In the fourth, twice. In the fifth year, after Lauren's comment about the renovation and my explanation of the trust terms, the invitations began declining. In the sixth, I was there for major holidays and Oliver's birthday. In the seventh, the year of the kitchen table Sunday, I had been to their home 4 times. 4 times. My son's home, my grandchildren's kitchen. 4 times in 12 months. I cross-referenced this against Lauren's parents' presence. Her mother, a woman named Gloria, who I have always found pleasant in the specific way of people who are pleasant to everyone, except when they think no one important is watching, was at Christopher's home for dinner approximately twice a month throughout the same period. 4 versus 24. Same family, different access. I also tracked the trust fund requests. Over the 7 years of their marriage, Lauren made, directly or through Christopher, who served as a more comfortable messenger, 11 requests related to the trust fund. None of them met the terms. All of them were declined, politely, by me. The requests included home renovation, a vacation property they were considering, a car upgrade for Christopher, private school tuition for Oliver, which would have qualified, but which Lauren specified for a school I had concerns about and which we discussed and resolved differently, and various other items that a trust structured for a child's future welfare does not cover. 11 requests, 11 polite explanations of the terms, and an access to my grandchildren that decreased I noticed, in inverse proportion to the frequency of declined requests. I am a financial analyst. I understand correlations. I sat with that correlation for a long time before I named it, because naming it meant accepting something about my daughter-in-law and my son that I did not want to accept, that my access to my grandchildren was being quietly managed in response to my management of the trust, that the person who controlled the trust was being made uncomfortable enough, consistently enough, that the expectation was eventual compliance. That is a sophisticated strategy. I recognized it as such. And on the Sunday she sat in my kitchen and told me to stop interfering, I understood that the strategy had arrived at what she considered its final phase. She had apparently concluded that the time for patience was over. She had misjudged what patience means. Let me tell you exactly how that Sunday unfolded. Lauren called on Friday to say she and Christopher would be stopping by Sunday afternoon, just briefly, she said. Christopher had something he wanted to drop off, some paperwork related to a financial account we had in common. Administrative. I said, of course, come for key. Christopher arrived, but spent most of the visit in my study looking for the paperwork, which took longer than expected. Lauren sat with me in the kitchen. We talked about Oliver's school. He had done well in a recent assessment, which I was genuinely pleased to hear. We talked about Sophie's drawing class. It was a normal conversation, warm enough, the particular warmth of two people who have learned to be civil without being close. And then, when Christopher was still in the study, Lauren set down her cup. Dorothy, I need you to hear me. You need to stop interfering in our lives. I want to tell you what happened in my body when she said that. Not the emotional experience, the physical one. A very specific stillness. The kind that comes when a financial analyst hears something that she has been tracking toward for 7 years and recognizes in the moment of its arrival that the data is finally complete. She continued. The interference she cited was specific. I had expressed an opinion about Oliver's homework schedule to Christopher, which Christopher had mentioned to Lauren. I had asked Sophie, during our last visit, about a friendship situation at school that Lauren felt was not my business. I had sent the children a book set that Lauren had not pre-approved, which she described as undermining her parenting choices. A book set? I had sent my grandchildren a book set. I listened to all of it, and when she finished, I said, "Thank you for telling me, Lauren. I'll give it some thought." She looked faintly surprised. She had, I think, prepared for more resistance. The calm acceptance confused her slightly, which I could see in the way her expression recalibrated. "We do appreciate everything you've done. The trust fund is wonderful, and we're grateful." The trust fund is wonderful? "The children love you," she added. "I love them," I said. Christopher emerged from the study with the paperwork. He looked between us. He had, I think, been listening from the hallway for some portion of the conversation and was reading the room with the expression of a man who is hoping a situation has been resolved without requiring him to have an opinion about it. They left 20 minutes later. I sat at my table. I thought about what she had said. Not the interference charges, those were thin and she knew it. I thought about the phrase she had chosen, stop interfering in our lives. In our lives. Not in our parenting, not in our decisions about the children. In our lives. Broad, encompassing, the kind of language that creates a category rather than describing a specific complaint. Stop interfering in our lives was not a request about the book set. It was a declaration of jurisdiction. She was declaring that the space of their lives did not include me unless and until she chose to include me. I picked up my phone. I called my attorney, Richard, who has handled my financial and estate matters for 20 years. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Richard, I need to talk about the trust. Has anyone ever looked you in the eye and told you to stop interfering in the life of a family you helped build? Drop it in the comments, because I think the people sitting across from that kind of statement know exactly the feeling I'm describing. The specific, cold clarity of understanding what is actually being said underneath the words. Right here, Lauren is in her car, driving home, believing that the conversation went well, believing that the calm reception of her message meant compliance was coming. I am at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand, and I am about to tell Richard something that will change the trust fund in a way Lauren does not know is possible, and that she will not discover until she tries to access that distribution 4 weeks later. Because here is what Lauren did not know. She did not know that the trust had a provision, standard in trusts of this kind, included on my attorney's recommendation, reflecting the specific legal landscape of trustee authority that allowed me, as trustee, to freeze distributions under circumstances that, in my judgment, as trustee, warranted review. She did not know that the trust had a pending distribution request, one that Christopher had submitted 3 weeks earlier. For the children's benefit, yes, legitimately within the trust terms, legitimately structured. A distribution for Oliver's next 2 years of school fees and Sophie's developmental program costs. A real, valid request. That I had been planning to approve until Sunday. Before I tell you what Richard said, before I tell you what Lauren discovered when she tried to access that distribution 4 weeks later, hit subscribe right now. I share a new story every single week about women who built things, about trusts and deeds, and the quiet authority of a document with your name on it, about what happens when someone mistakes your patience for weakness. Subscribe. And then stay, because what happened when Lauren called the trust administrator is the part I have never told publicly. Richard answered on the second ring, as I said. I have worked with Richard for 20 years. He is 71, semi-retired, still handles my matters because we have the kind of professional relationship that is built on 3 decades of trust and mutual respect, and the particular shorthand that develops between people who have worked through complicated things together. I explained what had happened, the Sunday visit, Lauren's statement, the pending distribution. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "What would you like to do, Dorothy?" I told him. I said, "I want to freeze the pending distribution. I want to put the trust into a review status, and I want to update the trustee succession document to reflect my current wishes." Trustee succession, the document that specifies who takes over the trust if I am unable or unwilling to serve. Lauren had assumed, I believe, that the natural succession would involve some level of parental access to the trust management. She had not read the trust documents carefully, or she had read them and not understood what trustee succession actually meant in terms of control. Richard said, "I can have the freeze in place by end of business Monday. The succession update will take a few days to draft properly. You'll need to come in to sign." Tuesday? Tuesday works. Thank you, Richard. Dorothy. A pause. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. Not out of anger, out of clarity. He said, "I'll see you Tuesday." I put my phone down. I made a fresh cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table in my house of 38 years, where my husband had sat across from me for 30 years, and my son had eaten breakfast for 18, and I felt something I recognized from my professional life, but had not felt in my personal one for a very long time. The satisfaction of a well-executed position. In financial analysis, a well-executed position is one that protects your assets under conditions you did not choose, using tools that were always available to you in a way that is completely legal and completely unassailable. The freeze was in place by Monday evening. I went to Richard's office on Tuesday and signed the succession update. The trust, as of Tuesday afternoon, was structured as I had always intended it to be, fully protective of the grandchildren's interests, fully under my authority, and fully inaccessible to distributions that I had not authorized. I did not call Christopher. I did not call Lauren. I went home. I made dinner. I called my friend Margaret, who has known me for 40 years, and who I trust with the things I don't tell most people. I told her what had happened. She listened the way Margaret always listens, completely, without inserting herself, and then with the one question that matters. How do you feel? Like myself, for the first time in a while. The distribution Christopher had requested was for the fall semester, Oliver's tuition and Sophie's program fees. The payment window opened in mid-October. On October 14th, Christopher called the trust administrator to confirm the distribution timeline. The administrator, a woman at the firm named Janet who handles trust operations, told Christopher that the trust was currently in review status and that no distributions could be processed until the trustee lifted the review. Christopher called me within the hour. I picked up. "Mom, the trust administrator says there's a freeze." "Yes," I said. "Why?" "I've put the trust into a review period. That's within my authority as trustee." "Mom, Oliver's tuition is due in 3 weeks." "I know. Why are you doing this?" I want to tell you exactly what I said, because I have been very precise about every word in this conversation, and I think the precision matters. "Christopher, I'm doing this because I need to understand the terms under which the trust is operating. The trust is designed to benefit Oliver and Sophie within a family context that includes me as their grandmother. When Lauren told me on Sunday to stop interfering in your lives, I took that seriously. If I am not to be involved in your lives, I need to think carefully about the terms of my involvement in your financial future." Silence. Mom, that's not what she meant." "What did she mean?" Longer silence. "She was frustrated. She didn't mean you should have nothing to do with us." "Then I'd like to hear that from her, directly, not through you. A real conversation, the way Sunday's conversation was a real conversation. I'm available this week. You're holding the trust hostage." "I'm not holding it hostage," I said. "I'm exercising my authority as trustee to pause distributions during a period of review. That's in the trust documents. I've had this authority since the trust was established. I've never used it before because it was never necessary. And now it's necessary. Now it's appropriate," I said. "There's a difference." He was quiet for a long time. "I'll talk to Lauren," he said. "I'm available this week," I said again. We hung up. I made a note of the call. Date, time, substance, pay or boundary. Tell me in the comments, because I know this is the moment in the story where people have very different reactions. Some of you are nodding. Some of you are uncomfortable. I want to hear from both sides. Lauren called me on a Thursday. Not Christopher. Lauren. I want to note that because it tells you something. She understood that the conversation needed to happen between us directly, which meant she was more aware of the specific nature of what had occurred on Sunday than her "Christopher will talk to her" posture suggested. She called on Thursday evening. Her voice was different from the Sunday kitchen voice. The document reading quality was gone. What replaced it was something more honest, which I'll say to her credit. Lauren can be honest when cornesty is the only remaining option. "Dorothy, Christopher told me about the trust." "Yes. I want to understand what needs to happen to lift the freeze." "I'd like to have a real conversation," I said, "about what you meant on Sunday and about what you want our relationship to look like going forward. Not about the trust specifically, about us." A pause. "Okay. I'm not angry with you," I said. "I want to say that clearly. What you said on Sunday was honest, and I respect honesty even when the content is difficult. But I need to be equally honest with you. I have felt for several years that my access to my grandchildren has been managed in ways that are not purely about the children's well-being, and I have noticed the correlation between declined trust requests and declining invitations." Silence. A very long one. "That's not," she started. Stopped. "Take your time," I said. More silence. "I have made it harder," she said finally. "The visits. I don't always find it easy. You and Christopher are very close, and sometimes I feel outside of that, and I handle feeling outside of things by managing the situation, and I know that's not fair. I sat with that. It was, in its way, the most honest thing Lauren had ever said to me. Not a full accounting, not a complete admission, but genuine, a real piece of what had been happening from her mouth without the document reading quality. I appreciate that, I said. Very much. I don't think I was trying to push you out entirely, she said. I think I was trying to make my own space, and I made it at your expense. That wasn't right. No, I said. It wasn't. What do you need from me? I told her. Not a list, not a set of conditions, just the truth of what I needed, a genuine place in my grandchildren's lives that was not dependent on my management of a trust fund that existed because family is family and grandchildren need grandmothers. She listened. At the end of the call, she said, "Can I bring the kids over Saturday?" "I'd like that very much," I said. I called Richard on Friday morning. I said, "Lift the review, process the distribution." He said, "I'll take care of it today." The distribution cleared. Oliver's tuition was paid. Sophie's program fees were covered. Everything on time. No harm to the children, no consequences to the grandchildren, whose welfare had been my governing concern throughout. I want to tell you about what changed, because I think the change is the point. Saturday happened. Lauren brought the children. She stayed, which she had not always done. Usually she dropped them and left, which I had never questioned, because time with Oliver and Sophie, regardless of format, is time with Oliver and Sophie. She stayed and had coffee. We talked about not the trust, not Sunday, not any of it. We talked about Sophie's drawing, which has developed to the point where it is genuinely impressive for an 8-year-old, and about Oliver's reading preferences, and about a neighborhood situation Lauren was navigating that required more patience than she had. It was a normal afternoon. At one point, Sophie climbed into my lap, she still fits, just barely, and showed me a drawing she had made that week. A house, a lake, a stick figure she identified as Grandma Dot. I looked at Lauren over Sophie's head. She was watching with an expression I hadn't seen from her before, something that looked like the beginning of genuine feeling rather than managed presentation. My son called me the following week. He called without Lauren as context or prompt, which was also new. He talked for 40 minutes. He said, carefully, in the way of a man who is choosing words with the awareness that they have weight, that he had not been paying sufficient attention, that he had been deferring to Lauren in ways that were appropriate in some contexts and not in others, that he was sorry for the specific shape the last several years had taken. He did not say it perfectly. He said it honestly. I'll take honest over perfect every time. My friend Margaret called for an update a few weeks after everything resolved. She asked how I felt. Like the version of myself I recognize, I said. You were always that version. You just had to remind a few people. I reminded them with a trust freeze, I said. She laughed. Dorothy, Thomas would be proud. Thomas would have frozen it faster, I said. Absolutely, she said. He would have frozen it on Sunday and called Richard from the car. Has anyone ever been that person for you? The one who knew you well enough to see what you'd done clearly and name it correctly? Tell me in the comments. It has been 8 months since the Sunday kitchen table conversation. I see Oliver and Sophie approximately every 2 weeks now. Not because of the trust, because Lauren and I reached an understanding that made it possible, and because Christopher, having paid sufficient attention, began facilitating it in the way fathers and sons can, when they choose to. Sophie's drawings are in a dedicated folder in my kitchen. Oliver called me last month on his own, on a Tuesday evening, because he had read a book and wanted to tell me about the ending. That phone call. Just that. I have been in therapy for 3 years. I started after Gerald died, and have continued because I believe, as a woman who spent 31 years in an analytical field, that self-examination is maintenance, not crisis management. My therapist, Dr. Chen, said something about the trust freeze that I want to share because I think it is the most accurate framing of what happened. She said, "You didn't punish anyone. You protected something, and you used the tool that was designed exactly for that purpose. Trusts are designed to protect assets for beneficiaries under conditions the trustee determines are appropriate. I am the trustee. I made a determination. That is what the document was for. What I have been working through in therapy is not the freeze itself, that I am at peace with, but the years before it. The 7 years of tracking the correlation and saying nothing. The 11 declined requests and the accompanying reduction in access, and the way I absorbed both without naming what was happening. Dr. Chen asks me regularly, "Why did you wait?" And I tell her the honest answer. I was afraid that naming it would make it real. That as long as I tracked it without naming it, there was still a version of the family I wanted to believe existed. That the data and the interpretation could stay separate. They can't. Data always wants to be interpreted, and the interpretation, delayed, costs more than the early one would have. I did not delay this time. She said, "Stop interfering" on a Sunday afternoon, and I called Richard on Sunday evening. 7 years of data had given me the interpretation I needed, and when the final data point arrived, I acted on it within hours. That is what I would do differently. Not the freeze. The waiting. I want to say something to you directly. If you have established something for people you love, a trust, a fund, a savings account, a house, an inheritance in any form, and if the people who benefit from it have begun treating your generosity as an entitlement and your authority as an obstacle, I want you to hear this. The document with your name on it is not a formality. It is an instrument. It reflects choices you made with legal precision about the future. It is not a check with no conditions attached. It is a structure, built by you, governed by you, designed to serve the people you love, within terms you determined were right. And if those terms are being ignored, or if the authority the document grants you is being casually dismissed by someone who has confused access with ownership, you are allowed to use the document. That is what it is for. Maybe you're living a version of this. Maybe your document isn't a trust. Maybe it's a will that hasn't been updated to reflect what you learned. Maybe it's a property in your name that someone else has begun treating as shared. Maybe it's simply the accumulated generosity of years that has been accepted so consistently that no one around you can imagine it being conditional. I want you to ask yourself one question. When was the last time you looked at the document with your name on it and thought about what it actually gives you the authority to do? Because the authority was always there. Final question. When Lauren called me on Thursday and said, "I've made it harder than it needed to be," when she said the honest thing without the document reading voice, what do you think I should have done? Accept it and move forward the way I did? Ask for more, or was there something else entirely the right response? Tell me in the comments. I'm interested in all of it. And if this story meant something to you, if it named something you've been sitting with, hit the like button. Share it with someone who has a document with their name on it that they haven't been using. And subscribe, because I'll be here next week. There is a story in the description I think you'll need just as much as this one. I'll see you in the next one.